This session will emphasize the importance and urgency of climate action in cities, because cities are causing more than 70% of carbon emissions and pollution worldwide. Without low-carbon cities, climate action cannot succeed. Key lessons from East Asia is a high level of commitment and coordination of national and local government climate change policies and actions.
Good day to all. Thank you very much for joining East Asia Forum 2022. This is day 2 of the East Asia Forum. You have joined the session on developing carbon neutral cities. Let us begin. I will introduce session chair of this session, Asif Kima, Director of Urban and Social Sector Divisions of East Asia Department. Over to you, Asif.
You're on mute, Asif.
Apologies for this, and thank you very much again, Akiko. Hello, and a very warm welcome to this session on development of carbon neutral cities. The questions we will address in this session today are: why is it critical to develop new carbon and even carbon neutral cities, and how we can make cities less energy and carbon intensive and more resilient to climate challenges. We will first have a presentation from 2 of my colleagues who will go over to some of our projects in China and Mongolia, and then a panel discussion with 3 experts in the relevant field. Before we start with the presentation and panel discussion, I would like to set the stage for why in our challenging quest to reduce greenhouse gas or GHG emissions, the need to develop low carbon and even carbon neutral cities is critical. First, we are facing rapid urbanization. By 2050, roughly 70% of the world population, or 7 billion people, are expected to be living in urban areas. Today, the number stands roughly at 50% or 4 billion. More than 80% of this urban development will take place in Africa and in our Asia and Pacific region. Cities are and continue to be an attractive alternative to low density and lower income rural areas, as they promise higher living standards, income, job opportunities, and higher education for the youth. Second, urban areas are the largest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions due to their demand for energy and consumption. The majority of emissions rise from transportation, and energy use in buildings. Third, as the cities and urban areas are geographically concentrated and with high population density, it is more efficient and effective to provide the required social and physical infrastructure. Hence, transition towards environmentally sustainable and low carbon living should be easier. Given the mere concentration of large number of people in urban areas, any small change in policies or climate investments towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions is likely to have a significant environmental impact. Almost all world cities have agreed to greenhouse gas emission reductions by 2050. So the question is, how should we go about achieving this? Broadly, the mitigative actions center around three areas: new ways of urban public investment and policy planning, the use of new technologies, and encouraging desired behavioral changes. Cross-institutional multi-stakeholder planning efforts are the foundation that enables the execution of national or international climate objectives and policies. Not only does this entail coordination amongst central, provincial, and municipal institutions, but also across line agencies, private sector companies, and even communities and households. Planning efforts, in turn, should be underpinned by good data, starting from methodologically sound environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, and GHG accounting and reporting standards, and the ability to measure the outcomes of various urban GHG reduction policies and efforts. The scaling and adoption of new technologies is a very exciting area and often requires large, risky investments and new business models from the private sector. Private sector efforts need to be supported by well-planned regulatory incentives, as well as de-risking strategies through public investments. Urban mobility is one of the more mature areas where the municipalities can afford to invest in green vehicles, as well as offer rewards and subsidies for using public buses. However, the increased electrification of public transport requires infrastructure investments to encourage large-scale uptake. Technology solutions in energy production range from the more mature wind and solar projects to more advanced solutions like fission energy, investments into smart grids, hydrogen fuel production, and technologies related to improved energy storage and transport. These storage technologies can also provide an alternative to improve the efficiency of the energy systems for buildings. Finally, all successful climate actions have to be complemented by corresponding low carbon behavior. There are excellent examples of innovative policy solutions around the world that incentivize more responsible choices, ranging from adoption of ESG principles by companies to information sharing about the carbon footprint of several products or lifestyle choices. ADB's East Asia team has conducted many excellent projects to promote low carbon and carbon neutral cities, and we will showcase some of those examples today. Later, our panel discussion will allow us to learn further from each other and also discuss how we can further promote South-South knowledge exchange. Together, we can contribute to transformational change to overcome the climate challenge. Thank you. With this, I'll hand over the floor to two of my colleagues, Stefan Rao. Stefan is a senior urban development specialist and specializes in strategic urbanization policy and integrated economic and urban development project design and implementation, promoting socially inclusive and environmentally sound livable cities. His primary focus is on People's Republic of China. Stefan would also be supported by Arno Heckman. Arno is a principal urban development specialist in our East Asia department. He designs, processes, and administers integrated economic and urban development investment projects to promote inclusive and green livable cities, climate change adaptation and mitigation, environmentally sustainable and green urban rural development projects. Thank you, and over to you, Stefan and Arno.
Distinguished guests and experts, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, we know transformational change is urgently needed in cities are the source of the problem and also need to deliver the solutions to climate change mitigation. But that isn't simple. We have been helping cities in East Asia through technical assistance, policy dialogue, consultations, and contribute through projects. Next slide, please, Arno. But cities face a whole range of challenges. Next slide, please. Again, next slide, please. Cities are there with physical structures, infrastructures, buildings, etc., and government agencies and institutions and companies, and people are used to doing things most likely a carbon-intensive way. Cities are often planned, centered around cars as opposed to places for people, pedestrians and bicycles, hence they're carbon-intensive. They run along silos and linear economic models, and people are used to carbon-intensive lifestyles. All this is a lot of inertia that hinders rapid transformational change that is so urgently needed. So turning big ships takes big efforts and time, as there's a lot of inertia. Next slide, please. Low carbon development is a wicked multidimensional problem that requires cross-sectoral and cooperation and coordination. Urban and regional planning with low carbon land use and transport and open space patterns with the objective to reduce the need for transport and energy, low carbon transport and energy systems, utilities and lifestyles, and also apply smart city principles and systems. Asif has mentioned a range of specific areas for low carbon urban solutions. Next slide, please. Both mitigation and adaptation by themselves are multidimensional challenges and require coordinated actions. Beyond this, integrating mitigation and adaptation creates synergies and mutual benefits. First, many actions, if well considered, planned, and executed, contribute to both mitigation and adaptation, like, for example, compact city principles and well-planned green space systems. Second, with the rapidly changing climate and expected hazards and impacts, the investments in low carbon infrastructure needs to be resilient against future climate impacts. Next slide, please. Allow me to point out another important dimension. We often focus on low carbon development and greenhouse gas emission reduction as a single objective, while biodiversity loss from ecosystem degradation and resources scarcity are very critical for the sustainability of our planetary systems as well. Hence, circular economy, removing the concept that something is considered waste, is critical. And it will contribute to low carbon development as well, but it should be elevated as a key objective also in international discourse, relationships, and trade policies. There are very encouraging initiatives in the PRC and the European Union and other places around the world, as well as business community currently. Next slide, please. Again, next slide. What is an international case for ambitious multidimensional carbon neutral city development? Copenhagen was mentioned earlier by Asif, and the city of Malmö is just across the bay in Sweden. Yeah, just a bridge and tunnel right away. Next slide. Sorry, this slide is good. Sorry, go back, please. Malmö wants to be carbon neutral by 2030 and initiated a whole range of actions involving transport, like, for example, vehicle fleet will run on renewable energy, bicycle use will be promoted, and extensive bike paths will be constructed, and energy efficient buildings and renewable energy production in the city will be very visible, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So what have we done at ADB's East Asia department? Let's start with the PRC, and then my dear colleague Arnaud will report on Mongolia projects. Here's an overview of projects and types of projects that we have done that contribute to low carbon city development. I will not go through them all. You have just in the previous session heard from the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei Clean Air program with lots of activities. You will hear now about 3 other projects, and then there are projects, for example, like the Nanjing-Qinghai River Rehabilitation Project, where rivers are cleaned up and flood risk improved and greenways are planned along riverbanks, which is an adaptation investment, but also contributes significantly to mitigation in many ways. We have projects of the type of water supply and wastewater management, where water use efficiency is increased, treated wastewater is reused, and energy efficient utilities are applied. We have projects like solid waste management, where we increase recycling rates and decrease the need for landfill, and we also have waste to energy projects also supported by private sector. With mining and land remediation and wetland rehabilitation projects where we rehabilitate and reuse brownfields, saving inert energy. Next slide, please. The Xiangtan Low Carbon Transformation Sector Development Program supports more than 60 kilometers of roads with bus lanes and improved safety and non-motorized transport, energy and water efficient buildings. And a key innovation for this project is an ICT platform for informed decision-making and incentivizing behavior change. Aside from this, it also promotes and specifically incentivizes low carbon policy actions, just to name a few as well here. Next slide, please. The Heilongjiang Low Carbon Climate Resilient Healthy City project applies international best practice urban planning, integration of land use, transport and open space planning based on compact city principles with transit-oriented development, where a city is organized in increments of walkable mixed-use centers around transit stations. Here, the main investment is a bus rapid transit system that connects all major functions in the city, and along and across this pedestrian and bicycle networks are expanded and improved to increase ridership and promote healthy, active lifestyles with people walking more and cycling more. Linear parks are designed as greenways and also sponge city green infrastructure, reducing flood risk, and all of this will contribute to low carbon development as well. Next slide, please. The project has significant climate finance for both mitigation and adaptation, and it reduces at least very conservatively computed 60,000 tons of carbon emissions annually. Next slide, please. The project systematically and systemically integrates mitigation and adaptation, applying the sponge city concept with a watershed-based sponge city master plan and associated investments in both gray and green infrastructure. The green spaces improve the microclimate, i.e. less climate and less extreme heat and cold, and improved air quality and water quality and infiltration, carbon sequestration, and less need for travel as people can recreate locally, and so forth. Next slide, please. We have also integrated low carbon objectives with health and age inclusiveness objectives, developing a tool that is piloted in this project to tease out further specific health benefits, namely healthy and age-friendly city action and management planning. Next slide, please. The Heilongjiang Green Urban and Economic Revitalization Project is a different type of project where an overarching comprehensive concept and longer-term approach aims at profoundly transforming a Rust Belt type region to a green and low carbon diversified economy with green and clean cities that were there before running on coal mining and traditional polluting heavy industries. Next slide, please. Thank you very much, and over to you, Arnaud, for projects in Mongolia.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm not sure if, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm on video or not. So good day, everybody. We wanted here to focus on a specific eco-district solution and mechanism we have put in place in Ulaanbaatar through the Ulaanbaatar Green Affordable Housing Project to promote low carbon urban development. So one of the issues in the urban area is the substandard urban area. So substandard urban area, it means urban area where is lacking of key urban infrastructure and services. And they represent 25% of the 2 billion urban area in Asia. And they are generally the most vulnerable urban area in Asia, and they are also the one who are emitting most pollution and emitting the most GHG. And this is the case in Ulaanbaatar. In Ulaanbaatar, you have 60% of the population who live in the so-called substandard peri-urban area. So what does that mean exactly? It means this peri-urban area has grown time through urban-rural migration, and they have no heating system. So people are using individual stove, which create a lot of pollution, especially in the context of Mongolia, where the winter are very, very cold. And a lot of CO2 emission. There is no wastewater system, there are limited access to water, poor drainage system, and lack of public and social facility, and etc. And they are continuing to grow through migration and natural growth. And one of the main issue actually of those substandard peri-urban area, in Ulaanbaatar and Mongolia, we call it Gay area because Gay is the name of Mongolian tent. So the substandard Gay area is named Gay area. And one of the issue is the lack of access to affordable housing. Actually, those peri-urban areas, substandard, are there because people don't have access to affordable housing. So the only affordable solution for them is to go in those substandard peri-urban areas. So what we have used here, we have used a mechanism we call eco-district, which is an integrated planning and development process. And it's a complete solution at the neighborhood level, which combine private sector, public sector, and community participation. And it helps to bridge the gap actually to green policy objectives and practical investment. And it at the right scale and a step-by-step approach, meaning it creates block of urban area which can be replicated. And at a certain point, you have a certain area of the city which become eco-district and change the city shape. Before I go further, what is very important is those peri-urban areas are most of the time lacking of basic infrastructure. So you have first to extend main trunk infrastructure in those areas. So in Ulaanbaatar, that's what we have done in the first project. We extend main trunk infrastructure into some small urban centers to provide the enable environments to welcome this kind of solution or private sector investment. So what is eco-district? So eco-district here, we are talking about three key principles. It has to be green and resilient and maximize the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency. This block of urban area has to be a mixed land use and function to create a vibrant urban area, to maximize the green space and the public space and minimize the need for transportation. And it has to promote social mixed and inclusive design. We don't want to create ghettos, so we need to have those eco-districts to be able to produce social housing, affordable housing, and market rate housing. And market rate housing are very important because this is what will attract the private sector investment and will allow also to cross-subsidize within the urban block. Sorry. One important point we want to achieve here is not to create those eco-districts in empty land or empty space. Is really to use it to redevelop and renew those peri-urban area. So basically, the principle is everywhere the communities and households are willing to participate, they can swap their land or their assets to have a housing unit within the eco-district that will be developed on site. So it's not to move people 1,000 kilometers away or 100 kilometers away, but to provide a housing solution on the spot. So how we do that? The main principle of the eco-district we are using in Ulaanbaatar is the design-based. So as I mentioned, whenever there is a willingness to participate, we design the eco-district with all the parameters are described. And we divide the investment into two. On one part, we have public investment to provide municipal infrastructure, secondary connection, park, public space, and social housing. And the other part, we ask the private sector to invest in commercial area, market rate housing, and affordable housing. And to attract them, we have developed two funds. The first fund will provide loan through a very low interest loan through commercial banks to the developer. For them to be able to develop affordable housing. And the developer will reimburse the loan to the commercial bank that will use the same amount of money to provide green mortgage. So you have two-side loan, which help to stimulate demand and offer in affordable housing. And we have a grant also, which will provide subsidies to the developer to maximize all the green feature in their buildings, because we recognize the extra effort in investment that is needed. So you have really here private people and public partnerships. And what is interesting here is for a municipality, it decreases the level of investment. So 50% of the entire investment needs is financed by the private sector. So I went through some of the characteristics of the eco-district we want to put in place. What is important is, again, this land swapping mechanism, and the sector loan that we are using will help to replicate the eco-district. So on the screen, you can see what is existing now in gray and what we plan to have as an eco-district. So this is about 5 hectares of eco-district that will be after replicated. The objective is to create 10,000 housing units, 55% affordable, 15 social, and 30 market rate, and to redevelop 100 hectares of gay areas. And the size of it, the size of the project is more than 500 million. And the size is important because through the incentives for green construction method and green features, with the scale of it, it will help to develop construction value chain that are green and to decrease the price of those construction value chain to after reduce the need for grants. And we have a lot of policy and capacity building included in that. And the impact of the project will create a lot of mitigation, 8 million tons of CO2 in total, which with replication effect can go to 40 million tons of CO2. And we provide adaptation direct to 100,000 people until 1 million people for the entire Ulaanbaatar. Thank you. Back to you, Stefan.
Our next slide. Just quickly, we think it is very important that we have a multi-level and multi-sector, cross-sector iteration of learning and revising and scaling up, regulate and enforce, fund and implement based on evidence in the center. And this all should be happening on multiple levels, from the global to the local levels. Next slide, and I think that's all. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that presentations. Let us now pause for group photos. Would you please, all the speakers, panelists, turn on your video, please? Thank you. Everyone, please smile. Okay, we are good. Thank you so much. Over to you, Asif.
Thank you again, Akiko, and thank you, Stefan and Arno, for a very insightful presentation and some very good examples. Again, as Stefan mentioned, which is very clear when we look at all these projects, cross-institutional, multi-stakeholder planning efforts are extremely important, as well as the need for various line agencies, private sector companies, and financial institutions to get involved for success of these projects. I think with this, I'll introduce the 3 panelists for our second half of the session. I'll start with introducing Dr. Yang Hu. Dr. Yang is the Associate Senior Researcher and Research Director at Institute of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at Tsinghua University. From 2012 to 2020, she worked for China's National Center for Climate Change Strategy and International Cooperation, where she was appointed the Director of Policy and Regulation and Senior Researcher. Dr. Yang received her bachelor's and PhD from Tsinghua University in 2010. We have the second panelist is Yong Ye. Yong Ye is Country Director for Pakistan Resident Mission, and he's part of our Central and West Asia Department. Mr. Ye leads ADB's operations in Pakistan. He has more than 27 years of professional experience in international development finance. Before joining ADB, he was section chief at People's Republic of China's Ministry of Finance, and he joined ADB in 2000 and has held a series of increasingly senior positions, including director of the Central and West Asia Urban and Water Operations. Mr. Ye holds a doctorate in environmental economics, a master's degree in economics, and a bachelor's degree in physics from Tsinghua University in People's Republic of China. Finally, we have Mr. Drazen Kuchan. He is sector lead and senior urban and energy efficiency specialist. Mr. Drazen leads global urban development and energy efficiency sector at Division Mitigation and Adaptation and the Green Climate Fund. In his role, he is responsible for a portfolio valued at over $3 billion. His work is focusing on technical reviews of concept notes and funding proposals throughout the GCF project and review cycle, delivering strategic pipeline development with a strong emphasis on the green and resilient cities globally, while also contributing towards a broad policy deliberation in a multitude of international forums on cities and climate change and challenges related to scaling up climate finance and transformative transactions. He is responsible for the GCF portfolio of over 3 projects at different stages of development. Mr. Drazen is a former senior staff member of Asian Development Bank also. Welcome to all the 3 panelists. We are very glad to have you here. In terms of our panel discussion, perhaps I'll start with a couple of questions for each one of you, and then we'll just open the discussion for a broader Q&A. My first question, if it's okay, is perhaps for Dr. Yang. Dr. Yang, welcome again. My question is, you are very much involved in low carbon and carbon neutral city development in People's Republic of China, and Tsinghua University, where you work, is one of the leading institutions on this. What are your key observations and lessons from the China's pilot low carbon city program, and what were the key achievements as well as key challenges for your work?
Thank you, Asif. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm Yang Xiu from Tsinghua University, China. I'm very honored to be participated in this forum. Since I have worked for Chinese government to highly involved in the low carbon cities, provinces and cities pilot project. So here I have some experiences and some points to share with you that China has started its low carbon provinces and cities pilots project since the year 2010. So already 12 years. This project aimed at exploring new modes, pathways, providing experiences and demonstrating low carbon technologies and policies. There were in total 6 provinces and 81 cities selected as pilots. And they have covered all over China, from north to south, from east to west, from big cities to small cities. So after these 12 years exploration, I think here are several experiences could be summarized and maybe of help for different countries. First, I think low carbon development is not only energy issue, but also a social economic development issue. So the concept of development is very important. This should be the first thing, the core. And in China, of course, you know that we are using the concept that green is gold. So green could be followed. The green development should be followed. The second experience is that the local government initiative is very important. So a systematic mechanism and the policy system design is very important. And ahead of this, a clear target is the key. So the city should give a very clear target to denote the direction. and step-by-step evaluation to fulfill the target is essential. The third experience is, of course, technology is key issue. Technology is the solution, but actually there are different combinations of technologies, including nature-based solutions and behavioral change. So not only in order to improve efficiency and to control greenhouse gas, it is better to clarify the standard should be met, rather than denote which technology to be used. That is an experience. This could give more freedom and initiative to stakeholders for them to choose suitable technologies and solutions according to their own situation. And the last experience, but not least, peer learning is very important. So the best practices summarized will be very helpful for cities that not as pioneers. That not only gives best practices on how to do, but also give courage to the latecomers to start. So these experiences I think are also challenges in China. China cities are facing, which means in the future, China cities still need to strengthen the developing concept, and also the need to clarify the future target, need to find technologies and behavioral solutions according to their own situation, and need to summarize best practices. And as you know, that President Xi has declared the target that Peking before 2030, carbon neutrality achieved before 2060. So for cities' low carbon transition, I think two new issues are put forward. First is top design. The Chinese central government has declared that every province and city will be considered in the whole picture of all the country. The role of different provinces and cities should be realized based on the national target. And there will be a systematic design. And the second new thing is that China will start a new pilot project for carbon peaking, which is to demonstrate different ways of peaking pathway. So this is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yang. It's very interesting. Especially, I didn't realize the large scale of the program and almost 12 years of now experience and learning, which I'm sure you have seen a number of very interesting projects and models. And as you said, similar to again what we were discussing earlier, that there is a very strong need to ensure that it's just not an energy problem or energy issue, it is a socioeconomic issue, and there needs to be very broad-based government support from the national level, provincial, as well as at the city level. And technology is going to be the key contributor in terms of delivering some of this. So very, very helpful and very useful. Perhaps with this, I can move to CD Heilongjiang. CD Heilongjiang, your work in cities in Central and West Asia, and now as ADB's country director in Pakistan, includes many initiatives to improve urban livability and low carbon development. What are key challenges that you faced? And I think if I can just also add to this question is, how should we engage countries for cross-learning amongst Central West with East Asia? As we have just heard, there are a lot of interesting models that we can learn from China. But how should we do this South-South learning more successful? What is the right and what would be a good model for exchange of ideas? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Asif, and also thank you, Stefan and Arnold, for this very insightful presentation. I do believe the information there, the experience from the presentation or from the China is very relevant and valuable to our operation, our support in the Central and West Asia. Maybe just to start with, let me just give a very quick introduction about Central and West Asia region for the audience. So this region, we have 10 countries, very many of them are previous Soviet states. The region has undergone some unprecedented growth, very fast growth over the past 2 decades, benefiting very much from the market reform after the separation from the Soviet Union and taking the advantage of the relatively high commodity price in oil, gas, and metals. The countries in this region are very vulnerable to the climate change. For example, for Pakistan and Afghanistan, these 2 countries are constantly ranked among the top 20 highest climate risk countries. When it comes to the urban sector, I think for the urban sector, we have already feel the heat on this point already. Because we have seen in many of our DMC in this region, there are increased frequencies of the flooding in the cities. And also we have seen the competition of water resources with irrigation and other use of the water to feed the expanding urban areas and populations. So how we are going to address this, livable city and also the no carbon urban development issues? Broadly, we are taking a avoid, shift, improve approach. The first is to avoid or to reduce the carbon generating activities, such as promoting circular economy, this just mentioned already by the presentation, and also to reducing the travel through proper planning and enabling remote work or service delivery or provision. This has been seen very much during the COVID, their effectiveness and the ability to serve the population. The second is to shift to more energy efficient solutions, such as energy efficient city designs. Just now, I think we also hear this from the presentation, low carbon land use, the open space, and so on and so forth, including also the promotion of the mass public transport, which have quite some experience in this region. Third is to improve the technologies, such as energy efficient technologies and e-vehicles. However, in applying this approach, we do see quite some challenges in improving the urban livability and promoting no carbon development. The first I would like to say is the lack of the coherent public policy framework to cascade down the climate change consideration or actions into the different subsector, including the urban. So the lack of such a framework. So in our sense, it's still some gap there to implement whatever the national committed target or contribution target into the each sector. Second, the poor urban planning and absence of the urban master plan or subsector plans that handicapped the efforts or effectiveness of the efforts to address the climate change issue in the urban areas. The third is the poor regulation, institution, capacity, and also I heard also from the presentation, the coordination, in undertaking the efforts for the low carbon development in the city. I also want to add to one more point here is which I didn't hear, from the presentation in our region in particular, is the inadequate financing. If you add, the climate change into the traditional urban development, they will be incremental cost. So this point to the fact that the mechanism to internalize the climate change or climate externality should continue to be developed and strengthened so that we can, over our efforts to reduce or minimize the climate change risk or promote no carbon development, we can take our least cost solution route. Awareness campaign and broader stakeholder collaboration are also very essential, I think, to improve the public awareness and commitment to the low carbon consumption, behavior, and development. So just now, I think I wouldn't really, I think, given the time limits, I would probably just go quickly on this, how we can really facilitate the learning across the region. I would say the city twin is one of this good, effective solution that can, promote effective learning from one country, one city with another one. I think a few things I would recommend here. First is when we do the pairing of the twins or the cities, it's important to bear in mind to have similar experience or challenges when we do this pairing. Second one, I think both participants, participating cities need to have a full understanding about the local context and the constraint that they each other have, and be able to apply the advanced experience or good experience into the local context to ensure the implementability of those experience. So allow me to stop here. Thank you very much, Asif.
Thank you so much, CD Yongye. This is very helpful. And again, I fully agree with you that it is very important when we look at these twinning of cities for both parties to understand the local context for it to be successful. Another area that you mentioned about inadequate financing, I think this then takes us to our third panelist, Mr. Rejan Kuchan from the Green Climate Fund. Great to have you here in our panel, Rejan. I think the question for you would be that the Green Climate Fund is a key player in supporting low carbon development and carbon neutral cities around the world. What are the key challenges that you have experienced, and what are some of the success factors that you think, or best practices that you think would be applied to for projects in East Asia? And maybe given the time, I'll just add, what are the next steps for East Asian cities in both promoting low carbon development and adapting to climate change from strategic planning and climate financing perspective, and how ADB and GCF can jointly work together on these projects? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a whole list of very important questions. Good afternoon, colleagues from South Korea. It's always a pleasure to be together with ADB peers and colleagues. I'm very thrilled to be part of this conference. Thank you. So a lot of things have been already said, but key challenges to low carbon transformational change. We need to understand that the cities and population are the core drivers of the anthropogenic climate change, and we constantly need to push for the further and broader fundamental sector modification and system change. The GCF, as the financial instrument of the Paris Agreement, is in a business of fostering transformational change in support of mitigating the impact of human development on the climate and in building resilience to the impacts of climate change. And as mentioned earlier, we have been successfully financing over $3 billion of climate financing into the urban development projects, quite a few with the East Asian Regional Department. It is already said that urban population is expected to grow very rapidly to about 6.5 billion in 2050, meaning that these trends will translate into massive extension of urban infrastructure. And the challenge from the outset lies in avoiding path dependencies. In other words, the spread of conventional urbanization on a global scale must be stopped, and alternative scenarios of transformational pathways for cities and urban systems have to be found. So as cities and populations are some of the core drivers, we have to look for taking action in areas where the greatest potential leverage effects for the urban transformation towards sustainability are possible. And therefore understanding a close interaction between urban form, service access, and per capita GHG emissions are a must. Form and functioning of urban systems that currently perpetuate resource-intensive and high carbon process must be stopped at all costs. So the urban transformation, in short, towards sustainability requires fundamental changes in land use, energy and transportation systems, management of materials and material flows, urban settlement policies, and structural special designs of the cities. And you could already witness from your colleagues in PRC and Mongolia that ADB is pretty much on this pathway as well. In terms of our own strategy for GCF, we as GCF are pursuing the transformative pathways for cities that are focusing on decarbonized and distributed energy, energy efficient buildings, circular urban economy, and compact and resilient urban form, as well as sustainable urban mobility. So what are the success factors? What are really stories to be told in terms of how do we really look into, what are the success factors for transformative urban practices that deserve climate finance? We think there are two factors. One is there is an absolute methodological rigor in terms of prioritizing investments with optimal climate impact and enabling green investment modalities. And also secondly, de-risking and catalyzing financing structure and instruments to achieve appropriate leverage of private sector funds with public resources to a maximum impact. Now, we can all learn from two very successful joint ADB and GCF projects. One has been already mentioned here is the Ulaanbaatar Affordable Housing and Urban Renewal Project in Mongolia, where GCF alongside the ADB is helping Ulaanbaatar city to shift to low emission, climate resilient development pathway and supporting the development of 10,000 green housing units that will be fitted with photovoltaic panels. It will be built with a high efficiency isolation system, as Arnaud was already mentioning. Another project that I definitely want to flag here is the Catalyzing Climate Finance or Shandong Green Development Fund project in People's Republic of China, which is a 1.5 billion facility that is developed together with ADB, AFD, KfW, and us as a financier. There, we really have looked very closely into how we define the broad eligibility criteria for projects and a narrative criteria of performance for projects that really are functioning in terms of selection criteria and benchmarking against specific climate targets. So we would look into the sectoral performance targets and project financing eligibility under the specific facility. We would also look into the benchmarking of the facility portfolio composition against the priority climate mitigation and adaptation investments. So the facility that I mentioned supports the long-term engagement with the Shandong provincial government and the PRC to finance the new generation of green infrastructure projects by offering higher risk profile, otherwise not proceeding due to public funding gap, and offering only limited sovereign support financing otherwise. So we are providing de-risking, bankability, significant climate impact, and achievement of green targets and climate impact targets with a threshold of minimum percentage of private financing being involved. So the concept is underpinned by the risk mitigation and by capital market access. Now, where do we move from here? Above all, I want to really suggest, as maybe as a staff member for financial instrument of the Paris Agreement, we have to be aware that there is actually very little space to still achieve the 1.5 degree warming scenario. We, as all distinguished professionals here will probably know, the IPCC report, the latest one, if you read between the lines, suggests that the 1.5 degree scenarios requires not just serious mitigation intervention, but actually physical removal of quite a few megatons of CO2 from our atmosphere before 2030, which we all believe is less and less possible. So what we're actually moving towards is a 2 degree scenario and beyond. The climate reality continues to unfold, and we will all need to further refinement of climate sensitivity, and we believe that there's going to be a warming coming to us that is going to be between 2.6 and 4.1 degrees Celsius in the next 30 to 50 years. So in such a warming world, there is one important element that I want to stress for urban sector, and that is that we need to have a better access to sustainable cooling. From cold chains and refrigeration to ensure the safety of foods, medicine, and vaccines, to space cooling to ensure comfortable, healthy, and productive homes, institutions, and workplaces. The need to adapt and build resilience in rapidly warming climate, together with growing populations, urbanization, rising disposable income levels in developing countries, are driving the exponentially growing demand for cooling services in many developing countries, which is associated with projected rapid increase in cooling-related energy demand and greenhouse gas emission. Now imagine this, the demand for space cooling has risen at an average pace of 4% per year since 2000, twice as quickly as for lighting or water heating. So higher energy consumption for space cooling and thermal comfort particularly impacts peak electricity demand especially during the hot days when equipment is used at a full capacity. Just imagine the hot summer day in Beijing or in Ulaanbaatar. So there is a window of opportunity to support access for cooling services while avoiding maladaptation and limiting GHG emissions if we can shift this growing demand towards climate-friendly, passive, and low-carbon cooling solutions. So I think with this in mind, I will stop my intervention and I look forward to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dresden. This is very helpful and very insightful, I think, and I'm also glad that ADB is working so closely with you on a number of projects and with some of the examples that you gave in Mongolia as well as in China, and hopefully we'll just further strengthen our collaboration with you. I think, unfortunately, although this is a very interesting discussion and we have some wonderful panelists, but I understand that now we have run out of time. There have been a few questions that the audience has asked, and Akiko, please let me know, or the session host, if we have any further time to answer these questions. Otherwise, they are also in the chat box, which we Stefan, Arno, and Dr. Young has very kindly shared. I really appreciate everyone's time, and I'm very grateful for this wonderful discussion. Thank you very much.